A blindfold does more than cover someone's eyes. It also reveals what a conflict is doing to the moral vision of everyone watching it. When Pope Leo was asked outside Castel Gandolfo about Gaza-bound activists reportedly handcuffed and blindfolded, he did not treat the detail as a side issue. He turned it toward the wider wound. Civilians in Gaza still suffering, still waiting for humanitarian aid, and still caught inside a crisis where human rights are too easily defended in selective terms. His answer was not loud. It was heavier than that. Human rights, he said, must be respected for everyone. Not only for the people one side finds sympathetic, not only for the people whose pain fits neatly into a political argument, for everyone. And that same concern followed him into a second warning about artificial intelligence in warfare and the danger of decisions becoming detached from the value of human life. The blindfold in the question was only the first sign of the deeper danger Pope Leo was naming. Castel Gandolfo is usually associated with papal rest, distance from Rome's daily machinery, and a quieter rhythm outside the Vatican walls. That made Pope Leo's exchange with journalists feel different from a formal speech. He was not issuing a long document. He was answering questions in a place that looked almost ordinary, while the subjects placed before him were anything but ordinary. Gaza, protest, violence, negotiations, and the use of artificial intelligence in war. That kind of setting can make papal language easier to misread. A sentence spoken outside a residence can sound less official than a statement released through Vatican diplomacy. But the Catholic logic underneath it is the same. When Pope Leo says human rights must be respected for everyone, he is drawing from a central conviction of Catholic social teaching. The dignity of the human person is not something a government creates, a military command suspends, or a political side grants only to its own people. It comes before all of that. That is a hard claim. It is hard because conflicts train people to narrow their compassion. The suffering of one group becomes visible, while the suffering of another group is treated as background noise. The Church's language tries to resist that narrowing. It does not mean every political question becomes simple. It does not mean every actor has the same responsibility. It does mean that a civilian waiting for aid, an activist restrained during a protest effort, and a person caught under the logic of war cannot be reduced to an inconvenience. The global Sumud flotilla matters here because it brought the humanitarian crisis into a visible act of protest. The article does not make the activists the center of the story. Gaza's civilians remain the center. But when journalists asked about reports that some flotilla activists had been handcuffed and blindfolded, the question forced a larger moral issue into the open. What happens when people trying to draw attention to suffering are themselves treated in a way that raises human rights concerns? The Holy See's role in a moment like this is limited, but not empty. It cannot open borders by command. It cannot force aid corridors into place. It cannot make armed actors return to negotiations simply because the Pope asks them to. Its influence works through moral pressure, diplomatic persistence, and the refusal to let the human person disappear beneath official language. Sometimes that sounds weak compared with military power. Sometimes it is the only voice naming what power would rather manage quietly. That is why a question about activists at sea quickly became an appeal for civilians still waiting for aid. The question that opened this part of the exchange was about the global Sumud flotilla, a Gaza-bound activist effort that had become part of the wider struggle over humanitarian access. Reports said some of those involved had been handcuffed and blindfolded. Pope Leo did not answer by arguing over the optics of protest. He answered by returning to the standard he wanted applied before anything else. The human rights of every person must be respected. That phrase, every person, is doing real work. In a conflict like this, language can quickly become a weapon. One side names its victims and leaves the other side unnamed. One side demands accountability and treats the other side's demand as propaganda. Pope Leo's answer refused that narrowing. He was not saying the facts on the ground are simple. He was saying the measure cannot change depending on who is being restrained, who is suffering, or who is politically useful. Then he turned back to Gaza itself. He said the people of Gaza are still not receiving humanitarian aid. That was the center of the appeal. The flotilla mattered because it pointed back to that failure. Protests were happening, he said, because people were still not getting what they needed to survive. Those protests then created complications, including the complications around the flotilla. It was a chain of consequences, not a clean moral diagram. Aid does not arrive. People protest. Authorities respond. Anger grows. Another crisis is added on top of the first one. Pope Leo made clear that he was not offering a polite suggestion. He said he wanted to renew the appeal not only as an invitation, but truly as an appeal. Then he urged all authorities to assist and accompany the people of Gaza and to help begin reconstruction. Assist points to the immediate need: food, medicine, shelter, protection. Accompany points to something deeper. It means not treating a wounded population as a distant problem to be managed only after the fighting stops. And reconstruction looks beyond the next shipment of aid toward the long work that would have to follow even if the guns went quiet. The Pope's language became even more direct when he described the people of Gaza as truly suffering and said they continue to suffer greatly. That is not complicated language. It is almost painfully plain. And that plainness matters, because wars often create a fog of explanations thick enough to hide the most basic fact. Civilians are bearing the cost. Pope Leo kept pulling the conversation back to that fact. Then came the question about what it means when unarmed peace activists are met with violence. His answer was one of the sharpest lines in the exchange. "We are provoking more and more hatred," he said. He did not give violence a moral exemption because it comes from one side rather than another. He said violence does not help from any side. That is not the same as saying every party has the same power or the same responsibility. It is saying that force, once it becomes the normal answer, teaches the next person to answer with force too. So Pope Leo pointed toward negotiations and dialogue. He said there is a need to return to negotiations and to seek, through dialogue, to resolve problems while respecting the human rights of everyone. That is a difficult appeal because negotiation can sound weak when people are furious, and dialogue can sound naive when suffering is immediate. Yet the alternative he named is worse. A world where hatred keeps being provoked until every path back becomes harder to find. Then the conversation moved from handcuffs and blocked aid to a colder form of distance, war shaped by artificial intelligence. Modern war can now hide a human being in more than one way. A civilian can be hidden behind a border closure. An activist can be hidden behind a security explanation. A family can be hidden behind the phrase humanitarian situation. And now, with artificial intelligence entering military decision-making, a human life can be hidden inside data, classification, distance, and speed. That is the connection Pope Leo was making. His warning about artificial intelligence was not a separate technology comment added to the end of a Gaza appeal. It belonged to the same moral argument. If the people of Gaza are not receiving humanitarian aid, the first danger is obvious. Bodies suffer, families are displaced, reconstruction cannot begin, and protest grows because ordinary channels have failed. But the second danger is quieter. Once human beings are treated mainly as problems to be processed, every system around them becomes more willing to look away. Pope Leo referred to recent conflicts, including in Lebanon, and said that war today is being waged with artificial intelligence without thinking about human lives. That sentence is severe because it names the distance modern warfare can create. A person does not have to stand face to face with the consequences of a decision. A machine can help identify, sort, recommend, accelerate, or automate. The decision can feel cleaner because the screen is clean. The damage is not. Speed is not conscience. That is why the phrase disarmed artificial intelligence matters. Pope Leo was not only asking that artificial intelligence be less dangerous in a technical sense, he was asking whether the world can build and govern powerful tools in a way that does not surrender the human person to the logic of efficiency. Disarmed artificial intelligence means technology that does not make war easier to wage without moral weight. It means intelligence that is not detached from wisdom. It means systems designed under the discipline of human dignity, not merely under the pressure of military advantage. The Vatican is not speaking about this from a distance only. When Pope Leo was asked how the Vatican intends to keep engaging major artificial intelligence companies after the publication of his recent encyclical, he said the dialogue is already ongoing. He pointed specifically to the dicastery for promoting integral human development and its collaboration with Anthropic, an artificial intelligence company. He described it as a kind of joint work, and said the invitation had been expressed yesterday by both sides. That detail is easy to pass over, but it matters. The dicastery for promoting integral human development is the Vatican office whose very name points to the whole person. Not just economics, not just technology, not just politics, but human development in its full moral and social meaning. By engaging Anthropic, the Vatican is trying to enter the room where powerful systems are being built, not simply issue statements after the fact. That is a different kind of work. It is slower. It is less dramatic. It is also necessary. Nothing in this makes the problem simple. Dialogue with an artificial intelligence company does not automatically prevent artificial intelligence from being used in war. A papal encyclical does not force governments, militaries, or armed groups to change their decisions. Calls for negotiation do not make enemies trust each other overnight. Appeals for humanitarian aid do not guarantee that aid reaches the people waiting for it. Pope Leo was naming a moral direction, Maxtade Verus Trive, not announcing a solved crisis. That is why Gaza, the flotilla, negotiations, Lebanon, artificial intelligence, Anthropic, and the Vatican dicastery all belong in the same story. The thread is the human person, the child waiting for aid, the activist restrained at sea, the civilian caught in a conflict shaped by machines, and the policymaker tempted to treat life as a calculation are all standing inside the same question. Will the world still recognize human dignity when recognition becomes costly? A papal appeal can open a moral door, but it cannot make the powerful walk through it. Vatican News gave the Tuesday Evening Exchange a simple headline: "Help the suffering people of Gaza and respect the human rights of all." The harder question is, what happens when that sentence is treated as too demanding for war, too inconvenient for politics, and too slow for the machines now entering the battlefield? If this helped you understand what the Church is actually doing in the world, liking the video helps more people find this kind of Catholic coverage. Subscribe for more Catholic news, Vatican context, and stories from the living history of the Church. And tell me in the comments, what do you think happens to the world if humanitarian aid, protest, and artificial intelligence in war are all treated mainly as security problems instead of human ones? The story continues, and so does the work.